The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Montana, 1875, as Zara Lockwood's trembling hand released the smoking revolver. The man who had tormented her for months now lay motionless in the dirt, his blood seeping into the parched earth beneath the boardwalk. Time seemed to stop as the townsfolk gathered, their shocked whispers cutting through the sudden silence like knives. "I didn't mean to," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible as she backed away from the scene. Her emerald eyes were wide with horror, blonde hair falling loose from its pins as she stumbled backward. He said he would. But no one was listening. They were staring at the body of Harold Thornton, one of the wealthiest cattle barons in the territory. To them, it didn't matter that he had threatened her, stalked her, made her life unbearable. All they saw was a respected businessman dead at the hands of the new schoolteacher who had arrived just 6 months ago. Sheriff Mills pushed through the crowd, his weathered face grave as he took in the scene. "Miss Lockwood, I'm going to have to take you in." As the cold metal of the handcuffs closed around her wrists, Zara caught sight of a tall figure watching from the shadows of the saloon. Yates Young, the quiet rancher whose land bordered Thornton's, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers across the distance. There was something in his gaze that wasn't present in the others, not judgment or fear, but something she couldn't quite name. That was the last she saw of him before being led away to await a trial everyone already believed would end with her hanging. 3 days later, Zara sat in the small jail cell, her once pristine blue dress now wrinkled and stained. She'd barely eaten, barely slept, the events replaying in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't escape. The sound of boots on the wooden floor made her look up. Sheriff Mills stood at the cell door, keys jingling in his hand. "You've made bail, Miss Lockwood." Zara frowned. "Bail? Who would?" "That would be me," came a deep voice from the doorway. Yates Young stepped into view, removing his hat to reveal thick chestnut hair that fell across his forehead. He wore simple clothes-worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. Nothing like the flashy attire Thornton had favored. But there was a quiet dignity about him that commanded respect. "Mr. Young." Sheriff Mills nodded. "She's all yours. Trial's set for 3 weeks from now." Zara stood frozen as the cell door swung open. "I don't understand." Yates met her gaze directly. "You need somewhere safe to stay until the trial. My ranch is far enough from town to keep you away from those seeking premature justice. Why would you help me?" Zara asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "You don't even know me." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I know enough. And contrary to what you might think, not everyone in Silver Creek believed Thornton was a saint." The ride to the Young ranch was silent, the Montana landscape stretching endlessly around them. The mountains in the distance stood like sentinels against the vast blue sky, and for the first time in days Zara felt like she could breathe. "I killed a man," she finally said, her voice small against the sound of hoofbeats. Yates kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Thornton was forcing himself on Eliza Carson 2 months ago when her husband walked in. Somehow Thornton walked away without a scratch, and a week later Carson's body was found in the creek. Accident, they called it." Zara's head snapped up. "What? That wasn't the first time either. Thornton believed his money gave him the right to take whatever he wanted." Yates glanced at her. "What did he try to do to you, Miss Lockwood?" The tears came then, hot and bitter. "He started with gifts. When I refused them, he began waiting outside the schoolhouse, following me home. Last week, he cornered me behind the mercantile and said if I didn't agree to be his, if I didn't submit to him, he'd make sure I lost my position. That no one would hire a schoolteacher with a reputation." Her voice broke. "Yesterday, he tried to drag me into his carriage. I had my father's revolver. I only meant to scare him." Yates nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "The law may not see it that way, but you did this town a favor." The Young ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a modest main house, a sturdy barn, and a bunkhouse for the handful of ranch hands he employed. It wasn't the largest spread in the territory, but it was well maintained, a testament to its owner's care. "It's not much," Yates said as he helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "But you'll be safe here." An older woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "About time you got back, Mr. Young. I've got stew ready and made up the guest room like you asked. Miss Lockwood, this is Mrs. Perkins. She helps around the house and makes sure I don't starve." Mrs. Perkins gave Zara a warm smile. "Don't you worry, dear. Anyone who put an end to Harold Thornton is welcome at my table." The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Mrs. Perkins proved to be a font of local knowledge, filling Zara in on the history of Silver Creek and its inhabitants while they worked together in the kitchen. Yates would leave early to tend to ranch business but always return for supper, his quiet presence becoming something Zara found herself looking forward to. A week after her arrival, Zara ventured to the corral where Yates was working with a young mare. She watched as he moved with the animal, his patience evident in every gesture. The horse, initially skittish, gradually relaxed under his gentle handling. "You're good with her," Zara said, approaching the fence. Yates looked up, a rare smile crossing his features. "She just needs someone to believe in her. Like most of us. Do you believe in me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He leaned against the fence post, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "I believe you're a woman who did what she had to do. I believe you deserve a fair chance. And I believe this town owes you more than it knows." That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Zara learned more about the man who had become her unlikely protector. Born in Ohio, Yates had come west after the war, working cattle drives before saving enough to purchase his own land 5 years ago. "What about you?" he asked. "What brought you to Silver Creek?" Zara watched a hawk circle lazily overhead. "My parents died last year influenza. I was teaching in St. Louis, but the memories. I needed a fresh start. The advertisement for a teacher here seemed like Providence." She laughed bitterly. "Some Providence. You couldn't have known what would happen. But I did kill him." The words that had been haunting her for days finally emerged. "Whatever his sins, I took a man's life. How does one live with that?" Yates was quiet for a long moment. "By remembering that sometimes survival isn't pretty. By acknowledging that regret doesn't change the past but can poison the future." His voice softened. "And by forgiving yourself, even when it seems impossible." As the days passed, Zara found herself drawn more and more to the quiet rancher. They would talk for hours in the evenings about books, about the war, about their dreams. Yates spoke of expanding his herd, of building something lasting. Zara confessed her fear that she'd never teach again, that the children she'd come to love were lost to her now. 2 weeks after her arrival, news came from town. Sheriff Mills rode out to inform them that witnesses had come forward, 2 women who had also been victims of Thornton's unwanted advances and had seen him attack Zara that day. "They're saying it was self-defense," the sheriff explained, hat in hand. "The prosecutor's considering dropping the charges." Hope bloomed in Zara's chest for the first time since that terrible day. But that night, as she helped Yates mend a saddle, she caught him watching her with an unreadable expression. "What is it?" she asked. "If the charges are dropped, you'll be free to go," he said, his attention returning to the leather in his hands. "Go where?" "Back to town. To your teaching position. To your life." Zara set down the needle she was holding. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" Yates looked up then, vulnerability evident in his eyes. "What I want doesn't matter. But you should know. You have a place here, if you choose it." Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. One of Yates's ranch hands burst in, breathless and disheveled. "Riders coming, boss. Looks like Thornton's boys from the Diamond T." Yates was on his feet instantly. "How many?" 8, maybe 10. "They're armed." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. Thornton's foreman, Silas Jenkins, had been vocal about avenging his boss's death, Legal proceedings be damned. Get Mrs. Perkins and Miss Lockwood to the root cellar, Yates ordered, reaching for his rifle. Then round up the men. We'll meet them at the property line. No! Zara grabbed his arm. This is my fight. I won't have you dying for me. His eyes softened as he looked at her. Some things are worth fighting for, Zara. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. Mrs. Perkins appeared, shotgun in hand. I'll get her to safety, Mr. Young. But I reckon Miss Lockwood's right, this is her battle too. Yates hesitated, then nodded tersely. Stay in the house. Use the rifle in my study if it comes to it. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Be careful. The next hour was the longest of Zara's life. She and Mrs. Perkins took up positions at the windows, watching as Yates and his 5 ranch hands confronted the approaching riders at the edge of the property. Words were exchanged too distant to hear, but the tension was visible even from afar. Then suddenly, a shot rang out. One of the Diamond T men fell from his horse. Chaos erupted as both sides took cover, exchanging fire. That's Jenkins with the red bandana, Mrs. Perkins said, pointing to a figure moving toward the house from the side. He's trying to flank them. Without thinking, Zara grabbed the rifle and headed for the back door. She wouldn't let this man hurt Yates or anyone else because of her. She moved through the garden, keeping low among the vegetable rows until she spotted Jenkins creeping along the edge of the barn. Her hands were steady as she raised the rifle, memories of her father teaching her to shoot flooding back. Jenkins! She called out. He whirled, his own gun coming up, but froze when he saw who had him in her sights. You killed him! He snarled. Thornton was good to me, gave me a chance when no one else would. He was going to violate me, Zara replied, her voice surprisingly calm. Just like he did to others. You know it's true. Jenkins's expression wavered. That ain't my concern. It is now. Because I won't miss this time, and it won't be an accident. For a long, tense moment they stood frozen. Then slowly, Jenkins lowered his weapon. This ain't over, he growled, but he backed away, disappearing into the trees. By sunset, the confrontation had ended. 2 of Thornton's men were wounded, and the rest had retreated, taking their injured with them. Yates had a graze on his arm but was otherwise unharmed. As Mrs. Perkins tended to his wound, he looked up at Zara. Jenkins? Gone. For now. Yates nodded, wincing slightly as Mrs. Perkins applied a bandage. He'll be back. Or someone else will. Thornton had friends in high places. That night Zara couldn't sleep. The events of the day played over and over in her mind, along with the realization that had come to her as she faced Jenkins. She didn't regret protecting herself from Thornton. The guilt that had been consuming her was giving way to something else, resolve. She slipped outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool night air. The ranch was peaceful under the moonlight, so different from the violence of the afternoon. Couldn't sleep? Yates's voice came from the shadows of the porch. She turned to find him leaning against a post, his injured arm held carefully at his side. No. Too much thinking. He stepped closer. About what? About how I've been hiding. Not just here at your ranch, but in my own mind. Hiding from what happened, from what it means. She met his gaze. I've been so consumed with guilt that I couldn't see the truth. Thornton would have hurt me, maybe killed me. I defended myself. Yates nodded slowly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. I know. But I had to come to it myself. She took a deep breath. And now I have to face whatever comes next. The trial, if there is one. The town's judgment. I can't keep hiding behind you. Is that what you think you've been doing? There was hurt in his voice. No, that came out wrong. Zara moved closer, close enough to see the silver in his eyes reflecting the moonlight. You've been my sanctuary, Yates. But I need to stand on my own 2 feet again. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. You never stop standing, Zara. You're the strongest person I know. The tenderness in his touch, in his words, broke something open inside her. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. For a moment, he was still, and she feared she had misread everything. Then his good arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer as he returned the kiss with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, Yates rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I first saw you teaching the children to read on the schoolhouse steps. Zara felt a blush warm her cheeks. You noticed me before. Everything? Everyone noticed you, Zara. You brought something special to this town. His expression grew serious. Which is why you need to go back. She pulled back slightly. What? Not to leave, he clarified quickly. But to reclaim your place. Your life. To show them all that you won't be driven away by fear or shame. Zara searched his face. And what about us? This? A slow smile spread across his features. I'm not going anywhere. And neither, I hope, are you. The next morning, a writer arrived from town. Judge Harrison had dismissed all charges against Zara based on the testimony of multiple witnesses and evidence of Thornton's previous attacks on women. She was free. The news brought relief but also uncertainty. Yates was right, she needed to return to Silver Creek, to face the community. But the prospect was terrifying. I'll go with you, Yates said as she prepared to leave 3 days later. You don't have to do this alone. They rode into town together, the stares of the townsfolk following them as they made their way down the main street. Some faces were friendly, others wary, a few openly hostile. Zara held her head high, Yates a steady presence beside her. Their first stop was the schoolhouse, where Zara found her replacement, a nervous young man barely out of school himself, struggling to maintain order among the children. When they saw her in the doorway, several of the students cried out in delight. Miss Lockwood! You're back! The young teacher looked relieved. The school board said your position would be held for you when you returned. As they left the schoolhouse, Zara felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. They want me back, she said, a note of wonder in her voice. Of course they do, Yates replied. You belong here. Their next stop was more difficult, the offices of the Silver Creek Gazette, where editor Marcus Walsh had written scathing articles about the murdering schoolmarm in the days following Thornton's death. Walsh looked up from his printing press, his expression guarded as they entered. Miss Lockwood. Mr. Young. What can I do for you? Zara stepped forward. You can print the truth, Mr. Walsh. About what kind of man Harold Thornton really was. About what he did to me and to other women in this town. Walsh's eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation against a dead man who can't defend himself. It's the truth, Yates said firmly. And you know it. Your own wife was afraid to be alone with Thornton at social gatherings. The editor paled slightly. How did you people talk? Yates shrugged. But they're afraid to talk publicly. You could change that, give them a voice. Walsh was silent for a long moment. I'll consider it, he finally said. As they stepped back onto the boardwalk, Zara felt eyes on her from across the street. Silas Jenkins stood with several other Diamond T men, his gaze hard and unforgiving. Ignore him, Yates murmured, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. But Zara shook her head. No. I need to face this. She crossed the street, stopping a few feet from Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins. He spat tobacco juice into the dust. You got some nerve showing your face here. This is my home now. I won't be driven away. You killed a good man. No, Zara said firmly. I killed a man who was about to do terrible things to me. A man who had done terrible things to others. That doesn't make me happy, but it doesn't make me a murderer either. Jenkins looked like he wanted to argue, but one of the other men put a hand on his arm. Let it go, Silas. We all knew what Thornton was like with women. My sister wouldn't even come to town if she knew he was around. The tension seemed to drain from the confrontation. Jenkins gave Zara one last hard look before turning away. "Don't expect me to forget," he muttered. "I don't," she replied. "I just expect you to recognize the truth." As the weeks passed, life in Silver Creek began to return to a new normal. Zara resumed her teaching position, the children's eager faces washing away the lingering shadows of her ordeal. The Gazette printed a detailed account of Thornton's history of violence against women, and though some still viewed Zara with suspicion, many more offered quiet support. And through it all, Yates was there, a steady presence, a hand to hold, a shoulder to lean on. Their courtship progressed in the eyes of the town, with Sunday dinners after church and evening walks along the creek. But it was in the private moments that Zara found herself falling truly, deeply in love. Yates reading poetry by lamplight, teaching her to rope a calf, listening intently as she shared her dreams for the school. 3 months after that fateful day, they sat together on the banks of Silver Creek, a picnic spread between them. The autumn light turned the changing leaves to gold, and the water sparkled as it flowed past them. "I've been thinking," Yates said, his fingers intertwined with hers. "A dangerous pastime," Zara teased. He smiled, but there was nervousness in his eyes that she rarely saw. "The ranch house is too big for just me. Has been for years." Zara's heart quickened. "Is that so? It needs someone to make it a home. Someone who loves books and children and isn't afraid to stand up for what's right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "Someone I can't imagine living without." Inside the box was a simple gold band with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She always said it should go to the woman who captured my heart completely." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "Yates. I love you, Zara Lockwood. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the promise of their future together. As they walked back toward town, hand in hand, Zara felt the last of her burden lifting. "I still think about it sometimes," she admitted. "What happened with Thornton? I wonder if I'll ever truly forgive myself." Yates stopped, turning to face her. His eyes held all the love and understanding she'd come to rely on. "She believed no one could forgive her," he whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Cowboy whispered I already have, long before you asked." Their wedding took place the following spring, with the entire town in attendance. Even Silas Jenkins came, standing awkwardly at the back of the church with a reluctant gift of a hand-carved butter churn. As Zara walked down the aisle toward her future husband, she felt not just forgiveness but redemption. The past couldn't be changed, but it had led her here to this man, this community, this life that was so much more than she had ever dreamed possible. Yates Young waited for her at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers. And as she took his hand, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the years that followed, the Young ranch prospered. Yates expanded his herd and built the largest barn in the county. Zara continued teaching until their first child was born, a daughter they named Hope, followed 2 years later by a son they called Benjamin. The schoolhouse was eventually replaced with a larger building, named Lockwood Hall in honor of Silver Creek's beloved teacher. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the ranch work was done, Yates and Zara would sit on their porch, watching the sunset and marveling at the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Yates asked once, as they celebrated 10 years of marriage. "Coming to Silver Creek? Everything that happened?" Zara looked at their home, at the children playing in the yard, at the life they had built together. "How could I regret the path that led me to you?" she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Some roads are harder than others, but it's where they lead that matters." And as Yates pulled her close, Zara knew that the forgiveness she had once thought impossible had become the foundation of her greatest happiness, not just his forgiveness or the town's, but finally, completely, her own.